seems like not too long ago, the year 2000 was considered far off and almost like too futuristic to ever come true. For those of you who can remember before the year 2000, it was just kind of seen as an out there number. And there was a huge Y2K scare with this computer problem. You can probably talk to Mike Klinker if you want more of the details of exactly what the big deal was with the computers and programming and such. But I do remember I was touring around doing mission work at the time, and a lot of the people's houses that I stayed at, they were stockpiling food, water. They had built little additions, bunkers under their houses. Like, people were freaking out about how the computer malfunction was going to end the world, and they were preparing for Armageddon. Before I was doing mission work at the time, and I actually ended up in India over the New Year's of 2000, so I wasn't too worried about the technology side of things, as they were not quite as advanced as us. After it was all said and done, Y2K just had a few minor glitches in different areas. I looked at, in the US, only two major things that were reported were there were 150 slot machines in Delaware that stopped working. That's a pretty big deal. And the U.S. Naval Observatory, which runs the master clock for the entire U.S. that keeps the country's official time, gave the wrong date on its website as January 1st, year 19,100. So those were kind of only two things I noticed. One of the girls on my team's father was in the military, and he was really concerned with her safety when we were in India over that time, being a military mind and kind of thinking worst case scenario. So he had told her that if anything went wrong with the New Year's, to hit the deck immediately, duck and cover, and prepare for the worst. And we happened to be at a New Year's Eve church service at the time, and right as the clock struck midnight, fireworks went off outside, and she hit the deck and covered down. And we weren't aware at the time that her father had given these instructions to her, so apparently she wasn't concerned with any of our welfare. But needless to say, we all got a pretty good reaction. We're all probably singing a hymn or something, and she goes down on the floor. What are you doing? I think this New Year 2015 passed without really any significant threat to our way of life. I don't think there was any computer issues or anything like we experienced 15 years ago. Many of us had parties with family and friends and celebrated another year of life. I don't know about you, but 2014 brought ups and downs. People were married, babies were born. We also lost loved ones. But the promise of the new year brings hope to everyone. Regardless of who you are or where you come from, New Year brings with it a clean slate and the opportunity to do things differently than the year before, or to continue building on progress that you made last year. I know for myself, as a stay-at-home dad, one of my main goals for 2015 is to get my son potty trained. That is mission number one. If I can do that, this year is going to be wonderful. But I think for us as Christians, this time of year can help us to keep things in perspective and to fix our eyes on our eternal destination. Last winter we did a series on the book of Revelation. You may remember. This is the last book in the New Testament, and the book's author's name was John. Some argue whether this was the Apostle John or just some other disciple named John. What we do know is that this John had been thrown into prison on the island of Patmos because of his refusal to stop telling people about Jesus. And throughout the book of Revelation, God gives John visions of heaven and of earth, and these verses are in your bulletin and kind of provide the theme for today. This is some of what God showed John. In Revelation 21, verses 1 through 5, it says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. our eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. This is our hope as Christians, that no matter how difficult or painful this life gets, our real lives lie beyond this carnal world and these mortal bodies. I couldn't help when Gary was leading worship, Better is One Day song, talking about how one day with God is better than all the thousands we'll have on earth. I started to think about my grandpa Marvin, who passed away recently, and just all that he's experienced. And it's been a couple of weeks for us, but I don't know what it's like there since there's no time. But just kind of thinking that everything he's experienced there just makes his thousands and thousands of days he's had on earth pale in comparison. So I'm sure we all have people, loved ones that we've lost, and think about what they're experiencing. Helps us make it a little easier to deal with. I know many of you, like myself, have physical struggles that make everyday tasks difficult, can be painful and distracting at the very least. I've had 2 significant surgeries in the last 5 years, one on my shoulder, one on my Achilles. And though I know I'll never be as physically strong as I used to be before these injuries, I know that someday God will make me new and make me whole again. There's a verse in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that speaks about this. It says, for we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. Meanwhile we groan, longing to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, because when we are clothed, we will not be found naked. For while we are in this tent, we groan and are burdened, because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now the one who has fashioned us for this very purpose is God, who has given us the Spirit as a deposit, guaranteeing what is to come. For some of us, this new year will be an opportunity to start over. Perhaps you're living in a new place, starting a new job, beginning a new family. This year will provide a foundation for your future. It's filled with expectation. Most of us are just trying to move on or forget some of our past mistakes. The new year provides hope that things can be different for us this year, regardless of what previous years looked like. You could say and give them a chance to try again. This next section is for the youth. Everybody else can still listen if you want, but every once in a while I got to throw in something. Keep breath and fall asleep over it. But I'm a pretty big video game fanatic, although my wife currently won't allow me to purchase PS4 or any console of my own, because I get a little bit angry when I lose certain games. But I grew up playing video games, and they will continue to be a huge part of my life, whether my wife wants it or not. And the first game I can ever remember playing, this came out before I was born, but I think it belonged either to my Uncle Bill or my Uncle Tim, in 1978. It's this handheld football game. Hard to see, but basically just had a few buttons, and then the little red blinking lights were the football players. So red lights would be going this way, the other red lights, the defense would be coming this way. You just try to avoid the red lights trying to tackle you. And I remember playing this game for hours at my grandma and grandma's house and thinking, man, it's not going to get any better than this. This is impressive. Much to my amazement, just such a system came out in the mid-'80s with the Nintendo Entertainment System. For those of you who were here last week, I believe this is the gift my brother Marcos got when I received the G.I. Joe Night Raven, which was my favorite gift of all time. But this provided hours of enjoyment for both my brother and myself and our many friends. The graphics obviously are much improved over the handheld game, though I'm not sure why they decided to angle the football field. It's a little weird. It's arguably the best and most enduring football franchise. Came out in 1988, the Madden football. This first appeared on the Apple IIe computer system. For those of you who had that computer, remember that screen and probably playing a little Oregon Trail on that. And so that was pretty fun. See a little crowd in there. Pretty lifelike. My favorite of all time probably have to be the Joe Montana football. This came out on Sega Genesis about 1991. There, it's getting a little better. I'll skip through the last 20-some years and bring you to the current Madden 2015 on PS4. And that essentially looks just about as good as watching live TV, which is crazy how far things have come. Back from the little handheld, which I thought this is it, and now obviously much improved. But we're always looking for new things. We're always pushing forward with technology and also in our lives. I think what fascinates me most about video games, and I think why they're such a draw for people, is that at the end of every game, even when you lose, it gives you the opportunity to continue, or to try again, or to start over. We crave second chances, and video games readily give you them. Most games you can play over and over and over. All you have to do is press a button, and your life is regenerated, and you're given another chance to beat the game. I think we can draw a parallel to our lives from this and other regular board games, for those of you who aren't into video games. We want a second chance when we fail. We want another opportunity to prove we have what it takes. Others of you may have for years had people telling you you're not good enough, or you'll never amount to anything, and that simply isn't true. Maybe you've settled in your job or career thinking that nothing better will ever come along, and you just have to accept it. God has better plans for you and wants you to dream big and embrace this new year. Changes may not come all at once, but little by little you can use new opportunities to get where God wants you to go. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, new creation has come. The old has gone and the new is here." God is in the business of making things new. When we realize God's plan for our lives and decide to follow Him, there are many things that become new. Some are extreme, some are more subtle. When I first became a Christian, I had a problem with swearing. I didn't necessarily curse like a sailor or anything, but it was a big enough problem that God convicted me of it and let me know it needed to change. I can remember my mother catching me several times, and one of her favorite punishments was to have me write, "I will not swear." It was like 1,000 times. I remember sitting in my room for a long period of time. I will not swear. I will not swear. So that, I think, helped too to kind of push me to change. So I don't know exactly how it happened, but I know that by spending more time with Him in prayer and reading the Bible, He gave me other words to say besides the negative ones that I've been using. And by no means done with saying bad things. I still struggle like anyone else, but for the most part, it's helped me to change my vocabulary and to use words to bless rather than curse. I would encourage each of you as this new year begins, think of all your family and friends, co-workers that have never experienced God. Pray for them, love them, and show them that things can be made new. That there is hope, even in the face of discouragement, disease, and death. And if we believe our lives will be made new here on earth,